Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Welcome, everyone. Steve, this is episode number 73 of From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Wow.
But before we jump into it, I want to hear about your weekend because I understand you were out of town.
I did. I had a really interesting weekend that's very classic cinema related. I was up in Boise, Idaho, because Cameron, my partner, directed a play up there, and I went up for the opening.
Right.
But Boise is not too far from Buell, Idaho, which is the hometown of the lovely Marjorie Reynolds.
Yes.
So I decided, I'm so close, why don't I go see Marjorie's hometown?
Yes.
So we rented a car and we drove out to Buell. It's a beautiful drive. It's all these plains with these very dramatic plateaus. And then you get into Buell and it's just this quaint little small town in Idaho with these really cool brick buildings. And there was once a theater, you can tell, with this beautiful marquee that's now a Mexican restaurant. That's just the way it goes. I think there's 4,000 people in Buell, but it was kind of fun just to walk the streets. And I kept thinking about what was little Marjorie like walking the streets of Buell.
Yes, dreaming her dreams of being a big movie star.
Yes, I'm sure she was. But anyway, it was kind of fun to kind of be in Marjorie Reynolds' hometown.
That is very cool. Sometime when we're both in my home state, we're going to have to do some sort of homage to all the folks.
Oh, Gail Sondergaard is from your hometown,
Judy
your home
Garland,
state. Judy Garland.
Richard Carlson.
Great people from Minnesota.
Yeah, Nan McNamara.
Nan McNamara, indeed.
Go past her house.
And Bob Dylan. That's
yes,
right.
And Bob Dylan. I'm excited to talk about these two folks that we get to chat about today.
Me too. I'm so excited because they are magic. They are absolutely
they truly
magic.
Are.
And so we're doing them as our stars, plural, because we have two of them this time, our stars of the month for February. And this month, we are honoring and celebrating the fantastic Nicholas brothers.
Yes, exciting. Who were considered to be one of the best dance teams to ever grace a motion picture screen.
And I would totally agree with that.
Yeah. They were born in the South. FAYARD was born in Mobile, Alabama in 1914, and his brother Harold was born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina in 1921 to Mother Viola, who was a pianist, and Father Ulysses, who was a drummer. So clearly, they got their rhythm from their parents.
They had it in the DNA,
they
for
did.
Sure. The brothers moved to Philadelphia when they were very young, and this is where they were really raised. And their parents, who were both college educated, had their own band called the Collegians.
Oh, cool.
I know, really cool. And they played in the budding vaudeville circuit. So music and rhythm, I mean, it was just part of the family.
Yes, yes.
So the brothers grew up watching their parents perform at the Standard Theater in Philadelphia, and they also got to watch these incredible acts who would come into town. When they saw Bill Robinson perform, it made them really take an interest in the combination of tap dancing and acrobatics, which of course would become their signature. Neither brother had any real formal dance training.
When you watch them, that is so hard to believe.
Yes, I can't believe they didn't have any training.
Yeah.
Well, FAYARD was self-taught. You know, he would learn from watching these great dancers who would come through the vaudeville scene. He then taught his siblings, which also included their sister, Dorothy. Well, initially, he and Dorothy soon started their own act called the Nicholas Kids, and they later added younger brother Harold to the act.
According to FAYARD, he's quoted as saying, "We worked up an act called the Nicholas Kids and did it in the living room," which I just love. That reminds me of my childhood. Our father said, "When you're dancing, don't look at your feet. Look at the audience. You're not entertaining yourself, you're entertaining the audience."
Good advice.
Very good advice. So when Dorothy left the act, FAYARD and Harold became known as the Nicholas brothers.
Right. As Harold told the Associated Press in 1987, we were tap dancers, but we put more style into it, more body work instead of just footwork. And their brand of dancing was a combination of tap, ballet, and acrobatics, which they called flash dancing or acrobatic dancing.
It's curious curious to me, too, because of the physical nature of their dancing. If they were just born with the kinds of muscles that required,
or how limber you had to be to do some of those moves.
Gosh, exactly.
Yeah, it's astonishing.
Soon they were well known in the Philadelphia area for their artistry, their innovation, and those acrobatic leaps. They appeared on the radio program, the Horn and Hard Art Children's Hour, which is very funny when you think about a dance act on a radio program.
I know, I thought the same thing when I read that.
But I guess tap, you would hear the sounds of the taps. Yeah. Exactly. So they later performed in local theaters as well, including the Standard and the Pearl. While they were performing at the Pearl in 1928, the manager of the Lafayette, one of Harlem's premier vaudeville theaters where Duke Ellington got his start, saw them, and they were immediately hired to perform there. Their parents quit performing and started managing their son's career, and they moved the entire family to Harlem.
And by 1932, they left the Lafayette Theater and moved over to Harlem's famous Cotten Club. This was the hub of the Harlem Renaissance in the 1930s. There, they were called showstoppers.
I can see why.
And I saw this YouTube video with Fayard's granddaughters, and they said the reason they called them the showstoppers was that no act wanted to go on after them.
Yeah.
Because how do you follow that up?
Exactly. I remember reading about them, and I think it was Fanny Bryce that said, I want to be moved earlier. I don't want to go right after them.
Yes, exactly. The Cotten Club became the Nicholas Brothers' home base. And that same year, 1932, they were asked to perform in a short film called Pie Pie Blackbird featuring U.B. Blake and his band, which also featured actress Nina Mae McKinney. The film sort of projects these racial stereotypes, and it's pretty cringy, but watching these young boys dance is just magical. It's really worth watching this, and you can find it on YouTube just to see these young boys and their artistry.
Harold Nicholas briefly broke out on his own for the short Stoopnocracy in 1933, where he got to show off his Cab Calloway impression.
Oh, wouldn't that have been fun to see?
Exactly, yeah. As well as he was in the independently produced pre-code drama Eugene O'Neill's The Emperor Jones, 1933 as well, which was a landmark film starring Paul Robeson. Harold performs a brief number in a nightclub sequence.
Now, in 1934, movie mogul Samuel Goldwyn caught the brothers' act at the Cotten Club, and he immediately cast them in the musical Kid Millions, also came out in 1934. This starred Eddie Cantor and Ann Sothern and Ethel Merman. This one is truly cringy.
Yes.
Because the brothers have to tap dance with Eddie Cantor while he wears blackface. So ouchie on that one.
Yeah.
But while the boys were in Hollywood making this movie, their father was tragically killed in a car crash while driving from New York to Los Angeles to come visit. Well, their mother had to step up to manage the boys solo. And this was a rare feat for a woman in those days.
Yeah.
But she did it well. And she, from what I hear, was a really tough negotiator for the boys.
Well, the Nicholas brothers soon began getting more and more film work, performing specialty dance numbers. They appeared in a number of films in the 30s. Jealousy, 1934, a boxing drama with Nancy Kelly and George Murphy. The Big Broadcast of 1936, which was actually in 1935, which starred Jack Oakey, George Burns, Gracie Allen, Bing Crosby, and again, Ethel Merman. Coronado, 1935, with Johnny Downs. My American Wife, 1936, starring Frances Lederer and Ann Sothern. And Don't Gamble with Love, 1936, again with Ann Sothern.
Now, the brothers made their Broadway debut in Ziegfeld Follies of 1936, which also featured Fanny Bryce, Bob Hope, Eve Arden, Josephine Baker, and Judy Canova. What an incredible cast.
Don't you wish we had that on?
Yes.
Something you could watch.
They followed this up with an appearance in the 1937 Richard Rodgers and Lorenz Hart Broadway hit Babes in Arms. And the choreographer of this play was so impressed with the brothers that he invited them to be a part of the film version in Hollywood the following year, which of course this became the Babes in Arms movie of 1937, which starred Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, became a huge hit.
They continued to perform in movies such as Down Argentine Way, 1940, where the brothers sing in Portuguese, which is a really hard language.
So hard.
And they do a Latin-flavored routine for stars Betty Grable, Donna Michi, Carmen Miranda, of course, and Charlotte Greenwood. Their appearance was so well received that 20th Century Fox signed them to a 6-picture deal. Well, finally, somebody signed them.
See their brilliance.
Yeah. This led to their appearance in Tin Pan Alley, 1940, again starring Betty Grable along with Alice Faye, Jack Oakey, and John Payne. And here they perform this kind of bizarre Arabian-themed dance while they're wearing nothing but turbans and what look like oversized diapers.
I know, turbans and diapers. Can you imagine? Well, you can see it on YouTube. You have to check it out.
Yeah.
There's no explaining what it is.
Right.
Well, following this, there were more appearances in Fox movies as part of their contract. They were in The Great American Broadcast, which came out in 1941 with Alice Faye and John Payne, and also Sun Valley Serenade, also 1941, with Olympic skating sensation Sonia Henney and John Payne. In Sun Valley Serenade, they performed this show-stopping Chattanooga Choo Choo. They're tap dancing along with Harold's real-life girlfriend, the great Dorothy Dandridge, in a very early performance. Let's take a listen.
When you hear the whistle blowing into the bar, then you know that Tennessee is not very far. Gotta hustle all the bowling, got to keep it rolling. Whoa, Chattanooga, there you are. Chattanooga, choo-choo, there you are.
Harold and Dorothy had met 2 years earlier while performing at the Cotten Club.
And on September 6th, 1942, Harold and Dorothy Dandridge were married. Together they had a daughter, Harolyn Suzanne.
Harolyn, isn't that the most adorable thing? You combine your names.
Harolyn. She was born a year later, and unfortunately, she was born with severe brain damage, which was a crushing blow to her parents, clearly. That same year, Fayard married his long-term girlfriend, Geraldine Pate. Pate was an actress who studied under the great Paul Robeson, and they would go on to have a son, Tony, who was born in March of 1945.
Well, the brothers' next film for Fox was Orchestra Wives, 1942, which starred George Montgomery and the wonderful Ann Rutherford. Mm-hmm. And in Orchestra Wives, they sing I've Got a Gal in Kalamazoo, accompanied by Glenn Miller and his orchestra. Despite racial restrictions, because you got to remember, they had no speaking parts, no scenes with their white co-stars, and dances designed to be easily deleted by Southern exhibitors. Despite all of that, they became huge film stars.
Yeah. I mean, they also weren't allowed to stay in the same venues that they actually performed at.
That's right. Yeah.
And they just were not treated the same way that a Fred Astaire or Gene Kelly was, simply because of the color of their skin.
If you ever read Lena Horne's great autobiography, she talks about she couldn't stay in these fancy clubs that she was the headliner.
Yeah.
So wrong.
It's so wrong. Well, in 1943, they perform a number which is perhaps maybe what they're most famous for over their long careers, called Jumpin' Jive with Cab Calloway. It's in the film Stormy Weather, which stars Lena Horne.
Speak of the devil.
Right. Their performance inspired Fred Astaire to declare it to be the greatest dance number he'd ever seen on film.
And I have to agree with Mr. Astaire there.
I know. We just revisited it before we started for recording. And so you have to go look at this on YouTube. You can easily find it. The number has them dancing on these tables in front of the orchestra musicians, and they jump over the musicians.
Which is incredible to see.
And they land in the splits.
Yes. And then bounce back up without any hands.
Exactly.
You know, and another thing about that number from Stormy Weather, according to Fayard's granddaughters, they did it without rehearsal and in one take.
Yes.
So think about that when you go see that video.
Right.
Well, author Constance Valis Hill explains in her 2000 book, Brotherhood in Rhythm, the jazz tap dancing of the Nicholas brothers. She says, quote, spins, cramp rolls, turns, and crossover steps were woven into the intricate pattern of sound and movement as the brothers spun out backsliding rhythms that slipped smoothly from place to place on the stage.
Well, and their son, Tony, is quoted as saying that when he would tell people that he was Fayard's son, people would say to him, after seeing them do that routine down the stairs, I don't believe the Nicholas brothers could have children because of the pounding down of the splits.
When you see those splits, it does make you question.
Yeah, it really does. It really does.
Oh, my gosh.
And with the outbreak of World War II, there are some changes in store for the brothers. But before we get into that, Steve, what is this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz?
Well, the question, of course, relates to our fabulous Nicholas brothers. The question is, in the 1990 music video All Right by the great Janet Jackson, she features the Nicholas brothers in her video. Well, she also features two other iconic musical celebrities. Who are they?
All right, we'll be back with more about the Nicholas brothers and the answer after this.
Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. Sometimes Hollywood's about some very crazy twists and turns career-wise. Here's one you may not have heard. Audrey Hepburn, of course, was ranked by the American Film Institute as the third greatest female screen legend from classical Hollywood cinema. But that career didn't start out in the traditional way. See, before she started acting, Audrey Hepburn was training to be, get this, a dental assistant. But before she could complete her training, she was discovered by a talent scout, and that led to her first role on Broadway in Gigi, which proved to be her big break, resulting in a very prolific movie career. But we're sure she would have been a fine dental assistant too. And now back to Steve and Ann from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everybody. We're excited to talk further about the great Nicholas brothers. But before we do, I'd like to give a shout out to our Listener of the Week. And this Listener of the Week comes all the way from across the pond, Liverpool, England. And that is Marilyn O'Neill. Marilyn, thank you for your beautiful email. Thank you for the compliments. Thank you for following us. Thank you for the support. We love it.
We are so international.
I love it.
Right? Well, we were talking about the outbreak of World War II just before the break. The brothers' career as a duo was put on hold as Fayard joined the U.S. Army, serving as a technician, 5th grade. Harold, however, could not serve in the military due to not meeting the height requirement. So he continued to work as a solo act in films like Reckless Age, 1944, starring Gloria Jean, and Carolina Blues, 1944, with Kay Kaiser and Ann Miller.
Well, when Fayard returned from the war, the brothers reunited on Broadway in the Harold Arlen Johnny Mercer musical St. Louis Woman in 1946. This also featured a young Pearl Bailey. And in this production, Harold introduced the world of the great song Come Rain or Come Shine. The show ran for 4 months.
After the show closed, the brothers headed back to Hollywood, where they appear in the MGM film The Pirate, 1948, with Judy Garland and Gene Kelly. This film was significant because it marked the first time that the racial barrier was broken when Gene Kelly danced with the brothers in the iconic number Be a Clown. You mean aside from when what's-his-name wore blackface?
Yeah, besides that. Which, yes.
Dear Lord. Now, according to sources, Kelly, who everyone knew to be quite the taskmaster and perfectionist, loved to rehearse. Harold, on the other hand, wasn't as much about rehearsing. They could just think of the numbers in their head and just perform them once.
Yeah, I think I read that Harold said that over-rehearsing is one of the worst things you could do for a dancer.
Yeah, and this apparently angered Kelly, who accused Harold of not knowing the choreography. So Harold responded by doing the entire routine by himself without missing a beat.
Of course he did.
Yes, he did.
But you know, sadly though, the exhibitors in the South, they still removed this iconic dance sequence from the prints.
Wow.
Well, you know, by now, Harold's marriage to Dorothy Dandridge had hit the skids. They were burdened by the care of their daughter, and they were also surrounded by these accusations of infidelity and abuse by Harold. They split up in 1948, and their divorce was finalized in 1951.
In 1950, Harold moved to France, where he worked as a singer and dancer. Fayard stayed in the United States and starred on pretty much every major television variety program and also headlined countless stage shows. Now, the brothers reunited in the 1950s and toured South America, appearing in a series of foreign films like Bota y Riposta, 1950 in Spain, El Mensaje de la Muerta, 1953 in Mexico, and Musik im Blut, 1955 in Germany. What'd you think of that? Pretty good, huh?
Great pronunciations. Woohoo! We are international.
Yes, we are.
Well, in 1955, Fayard and his wife Geraldine divorced, and he continued to work in nightclubs and variety shows. Meanwhile, Harold continued to perform solo in Europe and married for a second time to a French native named Elena Patron. They welcomed a son, Malie, in 1958.
And then in the 1960s, Harold appeared in the French film L'Empire de la Nuit, 1964, with Eddie Constantine. In 1967, Fayard married Barbara January, who ran a successful modeling agency.
So as the 1970s rolled around, Fayard was cast in a very rare dramatic role in director William Wyler's film The Liberation of L.B. Jones in 1970. The film, which was a neo-noir about a wealthy black funeral director who engages an ace attorney to help him divorce his much younger wife, was Wyler's final film of his impressive 45-year career.
Wow.
And although at this point Fayard was suffering from arthritis, he still managed to dance a bit in the film. Now, Harold was cast in Sidney Poitier's Uptown Saturday Night in 1974, which he starred in with Bill Cosby, Richard Pryor, Flip Wilson, and Harry Belafonte. Talk about a stellar cast.
Wow.
Now, in the film, Harold played this pint-sized gangster named Little Seymour Pettigrew. And it's very fun. He was able to showcase his talents for physical stunts in one of the movie's fight sequences.
In 1974, the brothers reunited on Broadway briefly when they starred in the limited engagement run of Sammy, a musical revue that starred, of course, Sammy Davis Jr., and featured Frida Payne.
Frida Payne, the great Frida Payne. Now, with the 70s came this renewed interest in old Hollywood musicals and this appreciation for the artistry of tap dancing. And the Nicholas brothers were featured in a compilation of highlights from the best of their MGM musicals in That's Entertainment back in 1974, and audiences were reintroduced to the brothers with the Be a Clown number from The Pirate with Gene Kelly. Over a decade later, their number from Down Argentine Way would be highlighted in the film That's Dancing.
In 1977, Harold married for a third time to producer Rigmor A. Newman, and he stayed very busy in the 1980s. He appeared in many television programs and in regional musical theater productions such as Stompin' at the Savoy in San Francisco in 1981, and the national tour of Sophisticated Ladies in 1982, in addition to a Duke Ellington tribute at the Long Beach Civic Light Opera in 1989.
And he also appeared in Tappin' Uptown, which was a revue at the Brooklyn Academy of Music in 1982, and he did the national tour of The Tap Dance Kid, the Broadway musical, in 1985. So yeah, he was busy in the 80s.
He really was.
One of the greatest admirers of the Nicholas brothers was Gregory Hines, the great, wonderful dancer Gregory Hines, who almost single-handedly reinvigorated the public's interest in tap dance. Hines joined forces with Nick Castle's son, Nick Castle Jr., to make the dramatic film Tap in 1989, and Harold Nicholas was one of several tap dancing legends who appeared in the film. At 67, Harold was still fast on his feet and could still leapfrog over someone and land in a split.
At 67.
Can you imagine?
That is nuts. Well, Gregory Hines, who died in 2003 at the age of 57, once said that if a film were ever to be made about the Nicholas brothers, the dance numbers would have to be computer generated because no dancer today could duplicate them.
It's so true. Who could do what those guys did?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah.
In 1989, Fayard was hired to co-choreograph the Broadway musical revue Black and Blue, which celebrated the black culture of dance and music in Paris between World War I and World War II. The production featured the music of Duke Ellington, W.C. Handy, Louis Armstrong, and so many others. And for his efforts, Fayard was awarded a Tony Award for his work.
Darn right.
Yes.
In the late 1980s and the early 1990s, the brothers taught tap dancing to stars such as Debbie Allen, a guy you might have heard of by the name of Michael Jackson. His sister.
And there's some great YouTube clips of Michael Jackson dancing with the Nicholas brothers. So
right.
definitely check that out.
Well, and Janet Jackson's video of All Right. You can find Janet Jackson with the Nicholas brothers, but we're not going to give away who else is in that
that's
because
right.
that's her.
That's our quiz,
That's
of,
our
the, quiz of the day.
But check it out on YouTube. In 1991, the brothers were awarded the Kennedy Center honor. Their elegance and athleticism was finally being recognized. Donald O'Connor, who wasn't such a bad dancer himself, called the brothers the greatest dancers that had ever lived in a tribute on the Biography Network. And ballet legend Mikhail Baryshnikov once called them the most amazing dancers he'd ever seen in his life. I wonder if Gregory Hines turned him on to them when they did that movie together.
They did that White Nights, right? 1985?
Yes, exactly.
That same year, 1991, Harold starred in the Robert Townsend-directed film The Five Heartbeats about the rise of a singing group. And in 1996, the brothers became artists in residence at Harvard University.
Wow.
They also taught dance at Radcliffe University and at the Ruth Page Center of the Arts in Chicago.
In 1998, after 31 years of marriage, Fayard's wife, Barbara, passed away. He remarried 2 years later, Catherine Hopkins.
That same year, Harold, who'd suffered heart ailments in the past several years, died in Manhattan in July of 2000 after heart surgery at the age of 79.
Fayard suffered a stroke in 2005. Until his stroke, he tap danced and spoke at dance festivals around the world. He passed away on January 24th, 2006 at the age of 91.
And the Nicholas brothers, they received so many tributes. In 2002, they were inducted into the International Tap Dancers Hall of Fame, and they also have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And the tributes to their artistry are many. And also, and I find this really interesting, Fayard's two granddaughters, Kathy and Nicole, they formed a group calling themselves the Nicholas Sisters, and they now perform as a tribute act to the artistry and the athleticism of their grandfather and their great uncle. And I can't think of a better living legend for these two pioneering dancing greats.
Absolutely. They are also featured in an installation at the Academy Museum here in Los Angeles called Regeneration Black Cinema 1898 to 1971, where you'll see lots of other Black artists who are finally getting a little bit of the due that they should have gotten many, many years ago.
Well, these two men were truly two of the best dancers to ever grace a film screen.
Yep, check them out on YouTube. You'll find lots of amazing numbers of theirs. Steve, what was the question for this week's pop quiz?
Well, the question was, in the 1990 Janet Jackson music video, All Right, she features the Nicholas brothers dancing. She also features two other iconic legends. Who were they?
Sid Charisse.
Yes.
And Cab Calloway.
Yes. So if you haven't seen that music video, and I love Janet Jackson for this because she had such an affinity for where she came from and dance and you know, the forefathers and mothers before her.
Right.
She specifically wanted them all in this great music video, and it's really something to see. So check that out too.
You can just see on her face how thrilled she is that she can give
She
them.
gets to dance with the Nicholas brothers.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's a cool video.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody for spending this time with us. We would really appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we would also appreciate it if you would follow us on social media. Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywood and you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and you can watch the podcast on YouTube.
And we love hearing from you. Please keep those emails coming. You can email us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's view.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Ann McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review, and tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. Associate producer and researcher John Price Ritchie. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved. That's a wrap.